Now, at the outset, let me thank Kashmir University and the Informatic Publishing who has given me this opportunity to present my views regarding the authentication of software in digital libraries. Now, before I present the views on the authentication software in the digital library, the main question before the librarianship or the library science is whether the libraries are or would be relevant in the technical driven area. So there are a lot of question about the existence of the library or viability of the library, whether they in the field, in the era of the Google, there is a need to have a library for the, even there is a perception among the reading community as well as the users, whatever you want, you can have on from the Google or even net available on the Google, or there are a lot of things are being said about the library. There is no need to have a library in the code. But in my view, libraries are still and will be relevant not for for the education purpose, for the development of the society also. There are a lot of region out of it. I can explain some of the region in the next slides, please. For example, libraries are not the four wall. It's a physical, it's not a physical environment, but it's an environment where people come and discuss their problem and find a solution. E- Not only the environment, the library main role to provide the uh, information, not to the present generation, but it has to save the information for the future generation also. Google doesn't have this obligation. Okay, they will save the all the information they are having for the future generation. If their commercial purpose is not meeting, they will delete those information which may be relevant for the future generation. Then there is a community function also for the library, because everybody cannot afford to buy every information. There are a lot of information which are available only for on subscription basis. For example, take an example. If you want to have an article from the Elsevier, you have to spend around $35 per articles. And researcher, I think that they won't be in a position to buy each and every article they need. Therefore, we have to have a institution which can provide those information which are available on price basis. So library is the only institution who can subscribe the resources for the community. Even everything is not available on the, because the Google indexes only the 20% of the resources which are available on the net. It means there are 80% of websites who do not allow Google to index their material for their uh, search engine. And moreover, the digital libraries are not internet. Because the library means you have an organized collection of the information which can be retrieved easily. And internet, always there is a perception among the community that internet is free. No, internet is not free. Nothing is free in the world. You have to pay something for it. Either you are paying your attention to the advertisement or there are many other things. And then you can manipulate the search in the internet, Google search. There are a lot of discussion are going on. Okay, whatever you want to see, they are not showing. Whatever they want to show it, they are showing on the priority basis. It may be possible that information you need may be on the last page of the Google, but because the commercial interests of the Google, they show the information for which they get the revenue. So they do not display their algorithm on what basis they are giving the first priority on the first particular website. Then there is a hard to isolate the information from the Google, because the librarians philosophy is to meet the right information to the right reader at a right time. But whenever we search the Google, it is not necessary we find the right information immediately. We have to do a lot of things to find the lot of that relevant information. Whereas in the library, the Google, the catalog provides you the right information at a right time. Now, even the government of India is insisting to have a digital library. Recently, they have announced the education policy into 2020 in July, I think in August or July. And in this, they have emphasized that the library books and further broad basing of the digital library, the university or the government will try to focus on the digital content of the documents which should be available in the library. Not only this, recently, the day before yesterday, the government of India has published a new order, new office memorandum, in which they have clearly mentioned that the appropriate use of ebooks is encouraged. Mean the future is going to be on a digital basis. And due to this implication of this information technology, due to and even the information communication methods are going to change due to the application of the technology, the definition of the library has also changed from the Ranganathan era to current era. For example, when we see the Ranganathan definition in which was given in 1931, a library means it's a collection of books kept for use. But after the implication of the information technology, we found that definition of the library had been changed drastically. According to the Library Handbook 2030, a library is a collection of resources in a variety of format. Earlier, it was only a one format, that is the print format. Then it is organized by the information professional or other expert. It means there are chances that the libraries can be organized by the other than the library professionals who are conversant or who are expert in the technology. And the latest library has to provide convenient physical, digital, bibliographical, and intellectual access. Not only this, the current library has to provide the targeted service, mean tailor-made service to them. They do not want the general bibliography. They want the information which they want. And with the mission of education informatics. And the goal of the library is to stimulate individual learning. We don't have to give the exact information. We have to give the education to the reader. Then how to call out the relevant information means the information literacy has to be come in this picture. Now, due to this implication of the information technology, there is a lot of change in the print information and electronic information. In case of print material, we have to have a ownership of that print material, or we got the ownership of the print material. Whether in case of electronic material, we just have to have an accessibility. Print materials can be accessed only at a designated place. Mean either it has to be library or wherever the print resource is lying. Whereas the electronic resources you can access from anywhere. You need not to have a fixed place. You can access from anywhere. Even in case of fixed print resources, you have a fixed period of accessibility. Mean the timing of the library is the only period where you can have access to the print resources. Whereas in case of electronic resources, you can access anytime, 24/7. You need not to have a 24 Republic Day holiday or independent holiday or the 2nd October holiday. Print resources generally are available in the single format, that is in print format. It may be periodicals or it may be books. But the electronic resources have a number of formats. In case of print acquisition of the document, you need not to enter in a written agreement. Whereas for the electronic resources, you have to enter for an agreement, even for a article or even for a book or for a journal. In case of print resources, there was a limited surveillance. Mean it was difficult to know the uses of a print resources, accept the circulation statistics, etc., etc. But in case of electronic resources, absolute surveillance is possible. You know the IPv6, in which you can provide IP even to every item exit on the earth. It means the smallest things can be given an IP. And if the IP has been given to a particular identity, you can follow that IP anywhere. Then Due to this implication of the technology, the role of the librarian has been changing a lot. Now, the librarian has to be technocrat also. He or she should know what is cloud computing, what are the different areas where we can have a cloud computing. The librarian has to be a negotiator, because in case of printed, there was a fixed price for everything. But in case of e-resources, there is a no fixed price. They can charge 10 rupees from me or 200 rupees from you. So you have to see how best we can negotiate with the legal e-resources. Then you have to be an evaluator for every document, because you have an usage statistics of each articles, each journal, each book. So you have to evaluate whether the particular journal is being used or not. And due to this usage, your acquisition should be evidence based. Evidence based means you know how much a particular journal has been used by the user. If a particular journal has not been used by users, then you need not to subscribe that. If a particular book has not been used by the user, you need not to acquire them. Then you have to have an open navigator also, because these days that the librarian is not only responsible for the subscribed resources, he or she has to provide the resources which are available in the open source, means where you don't have to pay the money, but you have to provide that resources to the your uh, students and the research scholars and the faculty member. And since you have to make an agreement for the every e-resources, you have to be a legal advisor. You know what are the terms are given in the agreement, what are their consequences in future, what is the copyright, what is the systematic downloading. You have to be aware about these things. Then you have to provide the information literacy program, so that the maximum and optimum use can be possible for the e-resources. And you have to provide a tailor-made information, mean the most you have to give an importance to the references which are listed in the syllabus first, then subscribe the other resources. And due to this uh, application of the information technology, uh, the last given by the S.R. Ranganathan, there has been a research by the OCSC a few years back, in which they have conducted a research on the relevance of 5 laws in the digital area. And they have found that all the 5 laws are still relevant. However, there is a need to change the sequence of the law. The survey concluded that the fourth law, save the time of the reader, should be the first law, because the reader wants that quick result. They want to see the 2020 match, not the test match. They do not want to be lost in the information ocean. They want their information at their convenient place, time, and format. Though, therefore, you have to give the some uh, technology or means by which they can get the information immediately. So the first and foremost technology is to provide the remote access to the users. And there are a lot of advantage for the giving the remote access. Mean you can have a anytime access. Mean you can provide access 24 into 7, 365 a days. Anywhere, wherever you are, whether you are at home, whether you are in office, or whether you are in somewhere else, you have to have an access to all the information. If you are providing remote access, you will be able to get the access from anywhere. And due to pandemic, this COVID-19, the University of Delhi had to conduct an open book exam. And there was a demand to have a material on the syllabus and the material on the papers. The library has provided the remote access to all the students and all the teachers, so that whatever material we have in electronic resources can be accessed by each and every student, so that they can give the open book examination. And there was a news item in the Times of India at 5 days back, that the University of Delhi have successfully conducted the open book examination. Now the new academic calendar has been started, and online teaching has also been started. Now, since the online teaching is there, the library has to supplement the teaching by providing the online resources. And students are not coming to the university, they are learning from their home. So it is the responsibility of the library, and it is the advantage of the remote access that can have access in their home by having a remote access. And the remote access helps in optimum use of the e-resources. If the person has ID password or the remote access, he can access whenever according to his convenience. So it enhances the use of the license. And the COVID-19 had forced us to make a social distancing. The students cannot be allowed to enter in the library, and this remote access help in getting the social distancing according to MHA guideline. Now, how to provide the remote access? There are various methods are available. For example, there is a VPN, and VPN means it extends a private network across a public network and enable users to send and receive data across shared or public network as if their computing device were directly connected to the private network. Means VPN creates a data tunnel between the institution network and the exit node in another location, which may be anywhere in the world. However, through that VPN, actually we are giving the complete file in the hand of the users. But there is another way to provide the cloud-based remote access to the user. In the cloud access, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, okay, okay. Now in the cloud-based access, the company from where we are getting the services, they buy a particular IP for an institution, and that IP will be used by the user for remote access. And whatever authenticated, whatever resources had been authenticated by particular IP, it will be those resources which can be accessed by the users. So this is the advantage. Whereas in the VPN, the complete system at your disposal. Whereas in the IP, cloud based, you can have access only those resources which has been authenticated by the particular IP. So there are many software are available in the to have a cloud-based remote access, like EgProxy is the OCLC, and Informatics has also one software, IRS, Informatic Remote Access System. And there are a lot of advantage for this IRS. We have used this IRS in our University of Delhi for the last 4 months. We have been using this particular product, and there are a lot of advantage of the IRS system. For example, it's a very user friendly. You can manage yourself all those. You need not to depend on the informatics to add the resources or delete the resources. You can delete whatever you want to delete, and you can add whatever you want to do. Even this particular software provides a unique facility, mean you can manage your resources. Mean whenever you start the subscription, you can enter your starting date and the ending date. So whenever the renewal process will start, you can get a complete report whether what are the resources which are going to be renewed. Moreover, by using this IRS, we will be able to have a authentic usage. Earlier, we used to depend on the publisher that is usage statistic. Whatever statistic they are providing, whether it's genuine or whether it's inflated, we have no idea. But by using this particular IRS software, the informatics software, we will be able to have an authentic usage. And there are a lot of advantage for the students also. It's a user friendly and seamless access, because by using this, we are having a cloud access, remote access. And hence we do not have to depend our own server. If our server is down, the access will not be hindered or will not be stopped. And since we have been using this, we have done some analysis of this IRS. At present, we have a 7,600 user on IRS. And out of this, maximum are the student, then faculty member. There are around 3,000 faculty members. around 4,000 postgraduate students, then around 529 are research scholar and 198. They all are using this IRS system. Then we are around more than 100, more than 150 resources which are available for access. It includes subscribe, it includes open access, and it includes ebook databases also. Then when we see the uses, we have found the every day hundreds of articles or books are being downloaded. Till date, since the 29th March 2020, more than 4 lakh documents have been downloaded from by the user through remote access. So it's an excellent software, and it's an I think we haven't got any complaint that we are not getting the access for any documents which are available through DULS. And friends, in the first slide, I'd say the Google cannot replace library. There are too many and irrelevant result. Everything is not on the internet. There are a lot of duplicate content. No control, no quality control means there is no peer review process. There is a lack of neutrality. A lot of controversies are going on. Okay. Facebook is not deleting, so that is bias information. A lot of fines have been imposed on the Google's search, and there has been a lawsuit by the Fair Search Organization in which European Union fined the Google company around $2.7 billion, giving the bias information. And even this Google or the social media, it's almost giving the threat to democracy. You can manage your election and through this is. So everything is not available on the net. Means recently there is a American Library Association report in which they, out of the total material available on the net, only the 8% website giving the academic contents. Therefore, friends, we have to adopt this technology, otherwise we will not be able to survive. As the Charles Darwin said, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. We have to respond to the changes. Main library has to respond to the technology. They have to accept the change. Not only accept the change, they have to adapt the change. And the reason behind it, the library cannot serve today users with the yesterday techniques and expect that we would survive tomorrow. Use stair, not the lift. Do not ignore the development of the 20th century. There are a lot of libraries which have not completed their print catalog. They are just concentrating on the e-resources. So I request them, I appeal them, whatever resources are they have, please manage them also through the technology. Incorporate the content of the change in the library school syllabus. The new technology has been there, e-resources, new format is there. So it is the responsibility of the library school to incorporate those changes in their syllabus so that the students will be able to run those new technology and market the library services so that the users will be aware what are the things are available in the library and what are the new services are available. This is my total presentation. Thank you very much to all the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Narendra Kumar. What an excellent presentation, sir. It actually depicts what is required by the user community at this juncture of COVID-19. As you rightly mentioned, that COVID-19 has really forced us to use this technology, which is anyway, in a way, it is a good thing. Just to correct one thing, sir, that as you mentioned, there are many technologies available, and Informatics has come out with new technology of remote access solution called as IRAS. That was the name what we had pre-launching. We have decided to have that. I mean, it was a technical name, and then 4 months, almost 4 months, we experienced it, and thousands of your users have experienced it. After that successful trials and many closures now, we have branded the name of remote access solution of informatics as Remote Log. So it will be named as Remote Log henceforth.
Okay, thank you.
And I must thank you that you are really adhering to the time. This is what discipline, what librarians show to us, all of us always. With your nice information, sir, we'll move on to the other presentation. As you mentioned that Government of India is insisting on digital books and digital libraries and digital, basically we are more emphasizing on research area, because we are competing to many developed countries. We want to be there in that range now. But then for research, as you mentioned also, many people copied from the Google and they just publish the paper. There are anti-plagiarism softwares available in the market. Many were believing on only one anti-plagiarism software from many years, and that was having monopoly in the area, and it was naturally being monopolistic attitude. They had highest pricing also. But through the advent of our Make in India thing, informatics has invested more in the research area, in the technology area, and we have come out with the product called as Drillbit. It is the anti-plagiarism software, and Drillbit has come out under Make in India, and it has got such facilities which are not available in well-known international brands also. May I request Mr. Raghavendra to come up and inform about Drillbit? Mr. Raghavendra, you can unmute yourself, you can put your video on, and you can share the screen also. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Devendra ji, and I thank you for informatics. And could you able to audible?
Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for informatics and Kashmir University for giving us opportunity for presenting our product demonstration. So before going that, just I'm emphasizing on what is the plagiarism, definition and meaning of the plagiarism, and what is the importance, why the research community has to be practicing for plagiarism strictly in varies from one organization to the another organization. Then I will explain our Drillbit and our organization and what are the features and how it is user friendly and cost effective. So shall I share my PPT?
Yes, sir. You please do that.
Oh, could you able to see PPT?
Yes, sir. We can see your PPT now.
Okay. Good afternoon, all the participants. So I am heading the business development unit in Drillbit plagiarism detection software. It's a Bangalore-based firm established in the year 2016. This is our fourth year journey, and we are having 700 plus organization from ranges from academic to research and development centers and defense institution and publishers using our software for originality check. So plagiarism, so I have taken one of the popular definition, a lot of definitions available in the literary world. See, plagiarism means to generate, to join, to authoring, to produce, to build a
Mr.
new.
Raghavendra,
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Could you please play the presentation right now? It in the not in the play mode.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Correct. Okay, plagiarism means, once you heard that, because this is the plagiarism what derived from the Latin word plagiarism, means that kidnapping. See, plagiarism means that generally if you are producing, generating, owning, authoring, creating, new document, fresh document, novel document without your own source. You are copying and pasting the somebody else's existing literature, published literature, and you are claiming that it's own document. Call it as a plagiarism. See, according to the Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, to plagiarize means to steal and pass off the ideas and words of another as one's own. So what you will do, you are copying the specific passage and using for your producing document. You are not properly giving the citation or references for the original creator, original owner, original idea generator of the specific content which you have been copied for your generating the new document, novel document, to use another production without crediting the source. So as I said, you are forgetting the proper citation. Proper citation means just you are listing out the whatever the source you used in the reference part. It will not end by calling it the logical citation. Citation means there is a two-part in-text citation and outer text citation. In-text citations, you have to give the double quote at the end of the sentence. You have to mention the reference number where you have copied that sources. So somebody else, they click on that sources, if they take them to the reference part, it will help them to the where author exactly used the sources. It has been mentioned in the body of the text. Either it may be dissertation, thesis, research article, conference paper, any of the intellectual output. To commit literary theft, to present as a new and original an idea or product derived from an other sources. In other words, plagiarism is an act of academic fraud, intellectual cheat. This is an academic cheat. It involves both stealing someone else's work and lying about it afterward. You are not only doing, it is also called the copyright infringement. You are not only copying, top of that you are lying that content, whatever I have prepared, it belongs to the me only. So I have taken a lot of different types of plagiarism existing in across the world. It is not relevant to the any specific institution or the geographic restricted. It has been practiced entire world. And relevant to this, when I was reading in recently one of the survey conducted by in the Western universities, according to the universities, those who are participated, the students, they confessed more than 64% of the students, they confessed that they copied the content for that the academic career, whatever the document they are submitting in their respective university, the content has been copied, that has been plagiarized. See, popularly following are the disguised types of plagiarism practice you may witness, and it is a tough to detect without sophisticated software and methodology incorporated in it. Even though if your respective universities where you are pursuing your academic or the research community and faculty members, that a particular institution does not have the any commercially software of plagiarism, even though their uploaded document could not able to detect what are the technology and methods and techniques used in to bifurcate the plagiarism detection software, so that they have to have the best plagiarism detection software to detect the what are the text has been plagiarized in the uploaded document. Direct and verbatim plagiarism, it means copy and pasting the passage of text without citations. Because I am an author, I want to use the specific passage of the copy to my writing research paper or thesis. I am using it and forget to give the citation. Self-plagiarism, reusing passage of ideas of previously submitted work. It is popularly called as recycling of the published literature. To relevant to that, I would like to give the experience of my previous organization. When I was discussing with one of the senior scientists, he told me that when he was pursuing his post PDF in the universities, that professor asked him to write a paper, and when he went to the library and wrote the few pages of paper and submitted this manuscript to the professor, just gone through it and told him that this is not your original content. The scientist confessed that, yes, I have copied from the available resources in the library. Then the professor told that in our university, we are practicing the zero tolerance about the plagiarism, and in our country also, we are dealing very strictly with the plagiarism. This is what the experience shared by the scientists, and since then he never engaged in the plagiarism, and also is not aware about the how much they strictly they're dealing with the plagiarism in the Western countries. So accidental plagiarism might occur without understanding how to cite their sources. See, in these cases, we can give the excuses because they are accepting that yes, we have copied, but they forget to cite the proper sources. Mosaic or patchwork plagiarism, multiple sources of ideas and text using and producing the para without citation. For example, I am an author. I want to, somebody has approached me writing a COVID-19 pandemic article. Just I am Googling it. I am getting a lot of sources. From 20 sources, I am producing 3 to 4 pages of article and submit it to the to whom I have been approached, and that is called enter. What I am doing for producing the 4 pages of article, I am taking the 1 or 2 paragraph from the different multiple sources and producing the one article. That act call it as a patchwork plagiarism or mosaic plagiarism. By doing it, I am not only committing the plagiarism, also I am committing the copyright plagiarism. So paraphrasing, de-adopting the someone else's ideas without citation. See what it doesn't mean that if I am writing on research article, I am searching lot of sources, one specific paragraph, I want to use that paragraph in my research article. If straight away I am using it, maybe I will caught with the plagiarism. What I am doing, lot of paraphrasing tools are available in the internet. I am copying that paragraph and running in that tool. What it will do, it will paraphrasing the copied paragraph. If you are reading the original paragraph and paraphrasing paragraph, sound and meaning remains the same, but in the paraphrase phrasing, what they do, they will change the active voice to the passive voice and replace the synonymous words. Complete plagiarism, copy and pasting the entire text someone as yours own. So these are the popular types. So I am moving to the, see what is the UGC guidelines for 2018 plagiarism. The main objective of the UGC guidelines is to create awareness, to establish institutional mechanism, to develop system to detect plagiarism, to set up mechanism to prevent plagiarism and punishment. See, most of the institutions, they are having internal ethical committee. That committee role is to detect the plagiarism, how to punish, and if they repeatedly they found some students or research community is plagiarism.
Raghavendra, can I pause you for a moment, please?
Yeah, sure.
Some feedback that it is being little fast.
Yeah, sure. Okay, okay. I'll go quickly.
We have ample time, not a problem.
You have to go for slowly or quickly?
No, we have to go little slow. Little slow because we have time, no problem.
Oh, okay. I go for little slow. Okay. No
yeah, it is little fast from your side right now. Please be little slow.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. See, most of the universities, they are having their own internal ethical committee. That committee, the roles and responsibility to, they fix what is the percentage of plagiarism percentage to the respective university. For example, A university is having the 10%, B university is fixing 8%, C university is following the UGC guidelines of 14 plagiarism percentage. And the content, what content to be checked necessarily under the guidelines of UGC 2018. Research papers, thesis, dissertations, chapters in books, full-fledged books, any other similar work. These are the items mandatorily need to be checked for the plagiarism. So similarity checks for exclusion from the plagiarism. What are the items we need to exclude from the uploaded document for plagiarism check in the plagiarism detection software? Say all quoted work reproduced with all necessary permission and or attributions. Double quoted works, whatever the double quoted words existing in your uploaded document needs to be excluded from the plagiarism check. All references, bibliography, table of content, preface and acknowledgements. These items needs to be excluded from the plagiarism check. All generic terms, laws, standard symbols and standard equations needs to be excluded from the plagiarism means Government of India, Indian Penal Code, CRPC, Bangalore Municipal Corporations, Government of Kashmir, University of Kashmir, and standard symbols, mathematical symbols, biological structures, chemical structures, these things needs to be excluded from the plagiarism check. That is what clearly told in the guidelines of UGC 2018. Levels of plagiarism and penalties in the case of plagiarism. See levels, they have categorized into four levels, 01, 01, 02 and level 3, level 1, 2, 3, from 0 to 3. See level 0, similarity percentage up to 10%. Penalties respect to the thesis and dissertation. See participant, I am requesting all of you to please give the attention to this slide. This is very, very important being a students, research scholars and faculty members. how it will impact your career and your pursuing education. See, if your uploaded document is containing 10% of the plagiarism minus similarity, there is absolutely no penalty. When it comes to the academic and research publications, minus similarity, no penalty. Level 1, similarities above 10% and below the 40%. Such student shall be asked to submit a revised script within a stipulated time period not exceeding. Mean, if your uploaded document containing 25 to 30% of the plagiarism percentage, then your respective department asks you to submit a revised script within 2 weeks, 1 week, or within the month. Within the stipulated period, student has to submit. When it comes to the academic and research publications, shall be asked you to withdraw the manuscript. There is no question of revise. So level 2, similarity above the 40% and to 60%. Such students shall be debarred from submitting revised script for a period of 1 year. Students, this is very, very important. Your uploaded document is containing more than 40% of the plagiarized text, you would be debarred from the submitting revised script for the period of 1 year. You should be very careful. When it comes to the academic research and publications, shall be asked to withdraw the manuscript, shall be denied a right to 1 annual increment. This is applicable to the research faculties. They would going to lose the 1 annual increment, shall not be allowed to supervise for a period of 2 years. They are also going to lose the 2 years of supervising the guides, research guide or research students. So level 3, when the similarity is above 60%, what would be the penalties? Thesis and dissertation. Such students' dissertation for that program shall be cancelled. There is no question of they are debarring nothing. They will going to be cancel your program. When it comes to the academic and research publications, shall be asked to the withdraw manuscript, shall be denied a right to 2 successive annual increment. In the previous case, 1 annual increment. In this case, they are going to lose the 2 successive annual increment and shall not be allowed to supervisor for a period of 2 years. So about so I am move on to the our company. As I said, Drillbit Softtech India Private Limited. It's an Bangalore-based startup firm established in the Karnataka in the year 2016 in the inspiration of Make in India. We have developed indigenous plagiarism detection software for checking the any duplicated, copied, and lifted and theft content. Comparison with we are having large databases. Or whatever the uploaded document, it will start analyzing to the our databases. So we have recently incorporated to analyzing the 17 Indian regional languages, including Kashmiri language. So this is our and Jawaharlal Nehru University of Delhi is our first customer. They are taken our software for checking the original content of the regional languages. Apart from English and foreign languages, our software supports the 17 Indian regional languages, including Kashmiri language. So, and also our firm is registered in portals respect to the state and central level. That is a JUMP portal. It's a central government initiative. The vendor can, the customer can buy the service and product to the vendor, registered vendors without middle management interventions. They can straight away purchase our product with the visiting the JUMP portal if they are already visited. And now the most of the elite institutions, they used to buy the services and product from the JUMP portal. It has been make it mandatory, and we had several customers, they had taken our product through JUMP portal. And also our company is recognized by the Startup India and Startup Cell of Karnataka. So what is the content coverage? See, content coverage is the soul of any plagiarism detection software. I am requesting participant to give attention to this slide. It covers all the documents available over the internet, which includes 67 plus billions of web pages, open access and commercial publishers and journals content we covers. Out of it, 11,600 publishers. Out of it, 8,600 is open access publishers, 3,000 is commercial publishers. We are also covering 55,000 journals. Out of it, 30,000 journals are open access, 25,000 journals are commercial journals. We are also having the 58 plus millions of articles existing in our coverage. Also, we are covering the student repositories, institutions repositories, aggregators, content like JSTOR, EBSCO, etc. We will cover, and our database is analyzing the uploaded content, ebooks and conference proceedings. This is very important part. As I said, any plagiarism detection software soul is the content coverage. This is what the coverage existing in our Drillbit anti-plagiarism software. See, just I am giving to draw your attention of the participant to who we are having the customers. Our service has been, as I said, just ours is a startup company. This is our 4th year journey. So we are having 21 plus universities. They are taken license of our product, and more than 150 colleges or institutions are using. 350 journals they are using our plagiarism detection software across the India. So in our customer list, few of customers are ranked in the NIRIF rank, and also few customers existing in the NAC A++ accredited grade customers also existing in our customers bunch. Just I am reading out the universities, few of them. ISRO Ahmedabad using our software from the past few years. CPRI, that is located in Bangalore, Central Power Research Institution, is using our plagiarism detection software. Competition Commission of India, Delhi, they are using our software. Central Institution of Freshwater Aquaculture using our software. Jawaharlal Nehru University, as I said in mentioned, the regional languages, JNU Delhi, they are using our software. Gulbarga University is using our software. KL University is using our software. When it comes to the engineering, JNTU Hyderabad is using our software from the past few years. Manipal Technical University Assam is using. CBIT Hyderabad using from the past 3 years of software.
Can we move to our features of the Drillbit, please?
Yeah. So these are the customers list. So these are the, so when we comes to the Drillbit features and the comparison with the other product, as mentioned in the beginning, see some product are dominated in the market because of they are costing more, and there is no user friendly and lot of features. So we come out, our cost economy and user friendly and lot of features existing because of when it comes to the compared to the other product, we are small institutions, lot of institutions existing in India. To fix their pricing model, we are delivering to the according to their usage and requirement. We are customize their price cost as well. See the features: effective repository system, upload previous year's papers into the repository to avoid duplication within the institution. This is the feature Drillbit is having. If any customers, they want to upload their previous year's dissertation thesis to their upload, because the common tendency of the student is to they copy and pasting the seniors and super seniors thesis. To avoid that one, if the previous stored those theses stored in our repository, it will easy to detect and analyze, and it will tell that the author, so the copied content is belongs to the so and so year thesis, it has been already submitted in the specific universities. So it will also detect the hidden character symbols. So what they used to do, in between the two words or some specific end of the word, they are using the special character to escape from the analyzing the plagiarism detection software. That also our Drillbit plagiarism detection software will detect. That feature existing in our software, it will not existing in the other softwares. So modified file detections, small fonts in between the two words. So for example, what they used to do in the two words, they will add some words, unless until if you could not zoom out the more than 500%, those words what they have inserted between the two words, you could not able to see in the bare eyes. So that the features existing in our Drillbit plagiarism detection software, it will not exist in the others. So it will also detect the alphanumeric word detections. What they used to do, so instead of LA, they what they using, they will replace with the I. Instead of cow, COW, they are using the replacing the O word with alphanumeric 0. So those kind of technique, the strategies or techniques what the student community is using, that also detected from our software. That feature existing in our software. So multiple file format. This is very, very important. To quite often our customers asking, our software will support the multiple file format: PDF, text, doc, docx, HTML, RTF, PPT, TIFF, and Excel. These are the different types of file formats. These file type formats our software will support. If you want to upload the document existing in the Word format, PDF format, any format, our software will support single file, multiple file, and zip file uploads. So we are having given the features of, if you want to upload single file, you can upload multiple file up to 10 file. This is file size of the more than 10 MB. So you can upload at the single time. Zip file up to 20 file you could able to upload in our software in the single time to analyze the originality content. Peer reviewed and instruction feedback also, that feature existing in our software. So automated grading system and exclude source option. This is very, very important. Most of the institutions, they want to asking us, see, we are following the UGC grading system. Automatically it will give the result page that the content, the uploaded content is belongs to the which grade. What I had explained in the PPT, the as per the UGC, they have graded into A, B, C, D. So A grade belongs to 0 to 1%, B grade is 11 to 40, C grade is 41 to 60, D grade is above 60%, and they are acceptable, unacceptable, and satisfactory. These way they have categorized it. We are adapted in our software UGC automatic grading system. It will automatically comes in the result page. And also we are given the exclude sources option, because I am an author. I have copied some content in my research writing papers. So I want to exclude those sources. So that option also you will get in the analysis page window. So content tracking and direct links to the source. So this is the feature we are having. Once you get the matched sources, if you want to get to know that where the exactly author has been copied, if you click on the link what we are given, it will take to the author exactly where the content has been copied and what is the percentage of content copied. You studied the closely, and they could able to reduce the plagiarism percentage, similarity percentage. And also the one more greatest feature of our product is we could able to integrate in the LMS, Moodle, Blackboard, or anything, any platform, any customer want to integrate our product into their platform, we could able to integrate, and also we could able to give the direct link to the customer's web page. These are the technical features existing in our Drillbit software. So thank you friends for giving us a wonderful opportunity. For because of the time constraints, I could not able to demonstrate my product. So if you are having any feedback, any questions and queries, just as requested, you should use in the question and answers, and you can text there before concluding sessions. Whatever the questions relevant to my part, I am going to answer it. Thank you very much once again for the informatics and the Kashmir University for giving me wonderful opportunity for presenting our product. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raghavendra, for a nice presentation.
Stop the sharing?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation, sir.
Thank you, sir.
As you rightly mentioned, under Make in India, it's a completely Indianized product, and Indian universities should really promote products in India. We have seen it affects our economy when we are completely dependent on external products.
Correct. Exactly.
Do that. I'll request others to all participants to really go through this Drillbit anti-plagiarism software. Just to move on, may I request Dr. Ishaq Lone come up with his presentation on COVID-19 and open access movement. Ishaq Lone is Assistant Librarian of Allama Iqbal Library, University of Kashmir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Davinder. Just a minute. Is it visible, and am I audible?
Yes, yes. You're audible and
Okay.
visible both. Thank you.
Okay. Related to this webinar, I try to see the COVID situation and the open access environment that we are having in existence. So, whether we have seen an increase of articles in open access domain, or we have seen some bit of these less amount of these articles coming in this open access domain. I try to figure out what is the current scenario and where we are going to move ahead. What is the responsibility that will be discussed during this talk. So the question is, has the COVID pandemic acted as a booster for open access movement, or it has proved detrimental for open access movement? So these questions we have to look into the current scenario. So the open access, as you all know, that is the unrestricted online access to articles. So I'm not talking about the open access of the libraries. I'm talking about the open access of articles, of open scholarly publication. That is the research articles coming about in the research journals that we are having in different on different platforms, whether the publishers are publishing or universities are publishing. We have to take those. We take those articles as open access, which are freely available to the users, and there is no restriction on those articles. So there are three types, and some other types can also be there, but I have jotted down three: the gold open access, green open access, and the hybrid open access. The gold open access, as you all know, the open access where the documents are coming from the publisher. The publisher is publishing the documents in the open access environment, and anyone from anywhere can download those articles. That is the gold open access form. And the examples can be from the PLOS, that's Public Library of Science and the Biomed Central. Then the green open access, that is very important, keeping in view the current scenario. The green open access means the self-archiving, okay? The self-archiving by the authors. That can be a manuscript, or that can be a preprint of the preprint version of the manuscript accepted by the publisher. That can also be there. It can be also the published paper, but there must be the privileges that the publisher has given to the author, that you can self-archive the paper. So they are depositing those articles in a repository, whereby anyone from anywhere in the world, they can access those articles in the open domain. That is called green open access. And we can have the examples, that is Archive and PubMed Central. Then another one that we heard from, rather that is there, and yesterday Mr. Grover also discussed about this, the hybrid open access of these journals, whereby that is it's a subscription-based journal, but they publish in open domain, they publish open access articles, but by charging article processing charges, they charge the authors for this publishing in open access domain. And we can have the example of Springer Nature and others as well, where these articles are getting published in open access mode, but the publishers, they charge the authors for doing so, keeping these articles in open access domain. Then what I tried to find out during this lockdown, during this COVID-19 situation, I tried to see the topmost journals, that is Nature, New England Journal of Medicine, Science, Lancet, Nature, Cell. I tried to see what is the scenario there, whether they are moving towards open access, whether they have put some content in the open access domain or not. So the results were astonishing, and what I found that many publishers, they have put the content, they have put the articles in open access domain. They are truly this time serving the humanity. They have published, and we cannot just now count the number of articles that are in open access domain related to this COVID-19, because what was the motive? The motive was to see the articles which are particularly related to the COVID-19. So here is the situation that first I tried to see the JAMA, that is a Journal of American Medical Association. They have a full page. They have kept their research articles. They have kept their reports, their discussions, their editorials, and other things. They have placed it at a place, single platform, and that is freely available, freely accessible to all. So that is a major thing that we cannot expect. We're not having these articles if the COVID situation would have not been there. These articles were the subscription based. These were on subscription basis, but they have tried to to excel the research regarding the development of vaccine or medicines regarding this COVID-19. They tried to put each and everything related to this, related to the COVID-19, whether that be research articles and others in open domain, so that anyone from any part of country can have access to those articles. Then the second one is also one of the leading and highly reputed journals, having a huge H index. They have what is the policy? Their policy is they put the articles in free domain after 6 months. But here they have changed their policy. They have put each and everything regarding related to the COVID-19. They have put online freely available to the users, so that they can research and they can come up with other things. They can come up with the vaccination. They come up with the new research, so that the humanity can be saved. And then the Lancet, they have also put the similar situation. They have a place, a separate web page has been created, whereby comments, whereby they have put research articles, editorial notes, editorial picks, and everything they related to the COVID-19. They have placed it at a single platform, so that users can access these resources. And then the Cell, as we all know, the highly reputed, these are all the highly reputed. I have not considered those journals, those platforms which are not highly reputed. These are the highly reputed, having higher scores of H index and other things, having impact factor, high impact factor in their own subjective fields. So the Cell, this is also a platform. They are publishing huge number of these journals, but keeping in view this current situation, they have also put huge content related to this COVID-19 in open access domain. And then the Nature, as you all know, the number one, we can see number one this research journal. They have also put a huge number of articles related to COVID-19, or we can say the SARS-CoV-2. They have put them as soon as they found that there is a need to put the articles in open access domain. They have done so. And then Wiley Online Library, they have also come up with this page, whereby the most articles are getting published freely and freely accessible to everyone. Any organization can access the articles, the book chapters from any part of the world. Then Oxford University Press, they have put Oxford academic, these journals at a platform, single platform, despite getting funded from others, their own institutions. They have put these research articles in open access domain. Then Elsevier, they have put huge these efforts have come from this Elsevier group. They have around 41,000 these research articles related to COVID-19, and they are the owners of these Lancet and Cell Press, whereby they get a huge number of these articles and other things for the researchers for the rest of the world. Then open access journals. Till this time, we were seeing the subscription-based these journals, whereby each and every library or every individual had to subscribe these journals, so that they can access those. But there are some open access journals already there. just like Science Advances. Science Advances, that is a completely open access journal. But from sciences, there are few journals like Science, Science Signaling, Science Translational Medicine, Science Immunology, Science Robotics. These are published, but after 1 year. After 1 year, they put their content freely in the open access domain. But keeping in the current situation, they have done so. They have put each and every article related to the COVID. They have put in open access domain and accessible at the very next moment they are publishing online, and so that users and so that scientists throughout the world can have access to those resources. Then a hybrid open access that I talked about, there is one platform that is BMJ. As I was talking about that, they put after 6 months. But here the situation is that they are publishing as soon as the articles are published by them related to the COVID, they are putting it in an open access domain so that users get benefited and scientists get benefited. Then the green open access, where preprints are mostly stored, mostly placed, and we have a good example from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, that is Medorxiv, that is a preprint server for health sciences. Actually, there are 6,553 these articles in this platform, and 1766 articles are from BioArchive. Both are from the same institute, but they have placed them in two platforms, and on each platform these articles are available freely to the users. These are the two platforms. And then there are reports, because reports matter at this point of time. Sometimes the organizations compile reports and no one sees them, and huge efforts are going on around the world. I have taken one example from CDC, that is a Center for Disease Control and Prevention, that from USA. As soon as they, on each day continuously, they just like today, it's the 5th of September, they today publish the reports that they have compiled by today, so that everyone from any part of the country, any part of the world rather, can have access to those reports, so that likewise they can do the research, or they can take benefit from those research. If they have used some medicine on trial basis and that has failed, then others cannot use and cannot so that others cannot make that trial on the patients in other parts of the world. Then there are you can see COVID-19 and open access. There are pros and cons always, and related to these open access articles, we can say if the open access articles are in green mode or other mode, there are pros and there are cons as well. But if the article is published in green open access, the data research becomes immediately available to the scholars around the world. So they can, as soon as the article is published or placed on their websites, each and every scholar from around the world can have access to that without getting the subscription, getting into the subscription, without thinking about the funds or other things, or going to the library asking them the username and passwords. They have put everything on the open access platform. That is the biggest advantage. And this doesn't wait for publishers to send the paper for review and wait for months together. If the papers are published in green open access, I'm talking about the green open access, so the publisher we have not to wait for the review process or other things, so that we can get the publication after 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. That time period has been shortened with this open access movement. The present scenario that is demands this thing, and open access, if we put the things in open access domain, and definitely those will be used most, and humanity will get benefited from that. We cannot wait for months, as many are dying. Then there are a few cons as well, and there is every likelihood that low quality research can come up in any green, I'm talking about the green open access environment, not the others, because the publishers, they do review process. But in a green open access environment, if anyone deposits any paper that is having low quality or is a plagiarized work that can prove detrimental for the millions of these people around the world. Then what's the responsibility of authors? During this COVID-19, authors need to choose journals cautiously who take less time, because the situation demands that articles should be published quickly as possible. So green open access can prove very beneficial during COVID crisis, and the research can become easily available to the users, but they need to take cautious steps. Proper scientific and ethical steps are to be followed before putting their content or before putting the article in green open access environment. Then there is a responsibility on the scientists at this point of time. They have to carry out research for the humanity at this point of time. They have not think about the monetary benefits, and try to make data research available as soon as possible so that lives are saved around the world. They have to follow, as I said, they have to follow, the scientists have to follow the scientific methods and other ethical these values they have to follow, so that research related to the COVID can come up in as soon as possible. So the responsibility of reviewers is also the time constraint I talked about time and again. They have to expedite in reviewing the work of scientists. They have not to take much time in reviewing the works. If the scientists have worked day and night, they have to also work day and night to review the articles for publishing in order to get them published as soon as possible. So the responsibility also lies on the publishers, and they have shown that during a preliminary, this is a preliminary study, and I have not taken it for months or others or a year. They have to make sure that research is available to all without thinking about the monetary benefits, which they are doing at this point of time, what I have seen. So they have to make sure that the author's manuscript are reviewed quickly and published quickly as well. So they have to keep track. They have to keep track of the authors submitted to them and submit to the reviewers, so that there should not be any lag on the part of the publishers for submitting the articles to the reviewer and getting it back. They have to monitor the process continuously, so that the publications come up as soon as possible in no time. And if possible, the publishers should fund some agencies also who are trying to do research but are lacking in terms of funds. And then there is responsibility on government institutions, private institutions, NGOs, and other funding areas. They have to support the research at this point of time. They cannot say we have no funds. They cannot say that we're short of funds. The budget is not there. In case the library requires any resource, and the scientists or these are authors need access to that resource, the funding agency, government institution, private institution, they have to make that fund available to the libraries or to the these scientists, so that they can have access to those resources. They can get equipment related to this for making the scientific findings or making experiments for which they require funds. And each and every person here they have to contribute towards this problem at this point of time, and they have to help scientists in publishing as well, because there are some journals who publish after charging the author these article processing charges. In case they are willing to publish in that particular journal, they must be also funded properly by their respective institutions. And then the biggest question, the responsibility lies on the library and information science professionals as well, because they know where the information is. So the information available is to be communicated to the users, is to be communicated to the scientists, to authors, to the science faculty, so that they come to know that these resources which were not available earlier are freely available at this point of time. Likewise, I can take example from our institution. So what we did, we combined the list of these journals which are freely available, and we distributed those to among all the faculty members from our institute, so that they get aware, they get information related to these open access articles and get benefited easily. And they have we library professionals, we have to strive for this open access movement now, because we have seen the benefits of this open access movement, and we have to make users aware about open access resources, particularly during this pandemic. That is very important, because many doctors, because many practitioners, they don't know the latest research, but the library professionals know where the latest research is coming, which are the reputed institutions, which are the reputed these journals where from we can get the latest information, and that to the correct information. So we have to pass it on to the these users, so that they can apply that research to their on their patients and others. And we have to support teaching research during this pandemic. We have seen e-learning has taken its roots, and we have to support the research at this point of time. The teaching we have to support at this point of time, and not last but not the least, we have to lead advocacy for implementation of policies related to the open access, so that more and more open access articles are coming out in the world, so that each and every person who is a taxpayer and is paying tax in one form or the another form, he gets benefited from the scientific findings at this point of time. And then coming to the conclusion, and on one or two suggestions, open access. So conclusion is that open access has got really boosted during this pandemic, COVID-19. Publishers have proved that nothing is more important than humans. They have proved at this point of time that they are not after the money only, and they have put the content in open access environment, forgetting about the loss that they have made by making these articles in open access domain. And then the government and private institutions, other government bodies should make policies related to open access publishing and conduct awareness regarding the same. Hope I have not taken much time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lone, for such a informative open access thing from your side. May I now request Mr. Jagannath for his presentation on implementation of digital library. Mr. Jagannath.
Thank you very much, Mr. Devendra. Thank you very much to University of Kashmir and my company Informatics for giving this opportunity. I'm just starting my presentation. Is my screen is visible?
Yes, yes, very much.
Yeah. So thank you. This is Jagannath from Informatics Publishing Limited. So I'm going to share my discoveries about the institutional repository. So first of all, understand what is institutional repository. And institutional repository is an archive.
Jagannath, I think you are facing some internet connectivity problem. You could put your video on.
And disseminating. These are the three important words in any digital library and users. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Save some internet. Yeah.
So I was talking about institutional repository. The major objective is to collect, preserve, and disseminating the digital content and intellectual output of any institution. So credit to Wikipedia for this wonderful definition. So what is the relevance of institutional repository at this point of time, the COVID-19 pandemic time? So this institutional repository can give the knowledge, and it can share the knowledge with the community through its institutional repository. See, we are all talking about self-reliant India, the Atmanirbhar, look for other service providers to provide you the digital library. But we should understand one thing, digital library is incomplete without institutional repository. Each and every institution is producing lot of intellectual output, which is not preserved, saved, and disseminated to its community. So this institutional repository can be a platform where we can store, preserve, and disseminate the information, knowledge, output, and intellectual output of all the faculty members and students. So what are the content types can institutional repository can hold? So independent, we can sit on this institute theses and dissertations, books, book chapters, sections, conference papers, reports, working papers, and bibliographic references, learning objects, data sets, patents, softwares, photos, videos, anything, any digital object can be stored on this institutional repository. So there is no limit. Whatever is digital can be preserved, can be collected, can be disseminated through this institutional repository platform. And there are many software platforms available for building the institutional repository. And in software, as all of you know, there are two types of software: open source software. Second one is for things are happening in open source applications, and you can find very wonderful applications, open source softwares available for building wonderful digital repositories. Hello.
Yes, Jagannath.
Yeah. So these are the leading softwares which are available under open source, and anybody can make use of it. And there are also closed or proprietary fee-based applications like Contendium and Digital Commons, to name a few.
I think your presentation is not shared right now. Screen is not shared.
Oh, that.
Yeah, it has come now.
Okay. So sorry for that. So I was talking about the softwares or software platforms available to build the institutional repositories. One is open source softwares platforms. Another is closed source or fee-based proprietary softwares platforms. And technical presentation on technical software comparison on these platforms are available in the report published by UNESCO. So I have provided the link. The complete comparison report can be available, and you can study all the comparison technical details in this particular report. So global statistics about using the different software platforms is provided in this bar chart. So you can see 40% of institutional repositories are built on DSpace, and remaining like ePrints, VPress, Contendium, so other platforms are contributing. minority, that is 55% of Indian institutional repositories are built on DSpace. And the second leading software platform, ePrints, which is contributing 34% of entire the institutional repositories built in India. So these statistics are taken from OpenDOIR as per September 2020. So let us deep dive into the DSpace repository, which is developed by HP Labs and MIT libraries. So actually the DSpace was launched in November 2002 by HP Labs and MIT libraries. And then it was converted into DSpace Foundation in July 2007. And then there was a collaboration with Fedora Commons organization in 2009. And then onwards, the community of DSpace is growing, and it is more than millions of communities available to support, to enhance this DSpace platform. And let us understand now on which platform we can install this DSpace institutional repository. So DSpace institutional repository can be installed both on Windows and Linux. So if you are comfortable in Windows, there is a Windows compatible version of DSpace available. We can use it. Many people say it is unstable, but we have used it. It is completely stable. We can work on Windows. We can install DSpace on Windows, and it works perfectly. And it also supports, and we can also install on Linux, any of the operating system. So here is the architecture of DSpace. It talks about all the 360-degree view of our institutional repository, the DSpace institutional repository. So it covers end-to-end, right from the contributing the content to the platform, and then preserving, indexing at the back end, and then retrieving the information stored on the platform. So first it is talking about the submission. So we can provide special privilege to the library staff or privileged members of the institution who can contribute the content into this institutional repository. So those who are having the privilege, they can contribute the content, and that content will be curated by the approver or checker. Once it is approved by the curator, so it will be part of the institutional repository. So each and every content, so we call it here as item. So each and every item will be linked with metadata. So all of you are knowing about the metadata. It's a data of data. So both metadata and the full text content will be merged together, linked together, and be stored into the database of this DSpace. So once it is available on the database, so it will be indexed, the complete metadata, and also the full text will be indexed. The full text index will be available for searching purpose. So any user who visits institutional repository, they can browse all the content based on the metadata like title, author, year, subject, keywords. So based on these, they can search and retrieve the content, or just like a Google, we can search, we can use the quick search or advanced search, and we can explore whatever content we are looking for in this repository. So it serves the entire purpose of content management, content preservation, and content dissemination. So all the three aspects of digital library is served in this institutional repository DSpace. So let us go further in understanding the DSpace. The topmost layer of this the institutional repository is the communities. So we can build n number of communities on this platform. So communities can be related to any department, colleges, research centers, schools, or labs. So if there is one university, and under university, if there are multiple colleges, for each college can be one community. Or if there is a university, under university, if there are multiple departments, each department can be one community. So like this, we can build hierarchical section on this DSpace platform. And for every community also we can give the description, image, and entire metadata of that particular community also we can give, and we can store it in the database. So under community, we can build n number of collections. Say if there is university, under university there are multiple colleges. Each college is one community, independent community, and each college can have multiple collections. So based on the content types, based on whatever the intellectual property is available within the institution, we can build various collections. So each collection also can have different kind of metadata along with images, and each collection can have multiple items or multiple files. So we can deposit multiple items within the collection. So this is how we can build the hierarchical section of our entire digital repository. So here is the example of providing two different community and building or giving the different collections within the community, and we can also have sub collection under the main collection. So like this, there is no limit actually for building. However, the structure you want to build, however you want to organize your organization's intellectual output, we can organize it based on these communities and collections. So next, let us understand about the items or the record which we are going to deposit into this institutional repository. So each and every item will be part of a collection. So first we need to understand in which collection I'm going to contribute, and then we can start contributing the content into the institutional repository. So while depositing any content, so we need to add the metadata. So I was talking about the metadata. It's a data about the data in any form. So DSpace supports Dublin Core metadata standard, and the main metadata fields are title, language, and submission date. So along with these mandatory fields, we can also have, and there is also inbuilt fields, optional fields like author, abstract, keywords, item type, unique identifier, project, funding agency. Like this, many more metadata fields are available on this DSpace platform. If you want to include your own custom metadata field, even that is also possible, and we can add our own custom field. And these metadata fields will display all the items, and it can be browsed through by author, by title, by year, and by keywords. The next, let us understand about the content management. One is organizing the content, and second one is contributing the content in the organized way. So any privileged user of any of the institution can contribute the content into the DSpace database. So we did not approach our IT person or hardware or software person, and we did not copy and paste the content into the server for making it available to in the website. So it has complete content management system. We can log in as the contributor, and we can submit the data using the web portal. So from wherever you are, we can contribute our intellectual output through this particular login, and that content will be curated by internal checker or quality control approver. So we can build our own workflows, how exactly the content can be contributed and approved within the platform, can be defined, can be set for each and every collection and community separately. So based on that, we can build the workflows. Based on the workflow, content will be submitted and content will be approved, and it will be available on the platform. So next, let us understand about the user management on this institutional repository. So DSpace has various level of privileged users. So number one is the regular user. So without even having the login ID password, any user can visit the DSpace institutional repository and they can explore like a website and they can explore all the content. So whenever they want to access the full text, so user need to have the login ID password. So when they have the login ID password, like only the faculty members, students can have the login ID password of that particular institution's institutional repository. So student and faculty members who is having the login ID password can access the full text content of the DSpace platform. And second one is the depositor. The second level of privilege, the user privilege is the depositor. So those who are having the depositor privilege can contribute the content. It could be the faculty members, it could be the students who contribute the intellectual output into this platform. So they can contribute and it will be lying in the buffer. So all the content which is lying in the buffer will be checked and approved by the approver. The third level, the user privilege, which is available on this platform. So checker has to approve the content and then the content will be made available on the platform. We can also have collection manager for every collection, for every community. We can have the manager. We can give special privilege who can add or remove the users from that community or collection. And as a top fifth level, there is a admin who can control the entire DSpace platform from the background. You can add or delete the users. You can add or delete the content. So you can manage literally everything. So all this can happen only on the user interface. So we need not get into the server. So using the UI, using the web application, we can perform all these activities. So next, the DSpace UI, the user interface also can be designed as per our institution's branding guidelines. So institution's logo, images can be added, and institutions, whatever structure is there based on the departments, however colleges are organized in the similar way, we can design the UI of the DSpace institutional repository. And there are two types of UI is available on this particular platform. One is JSP UI, another is XML UI. So earlier, all were using the XML UI, which is a traditional DSpace look. So now there are one more UI is also available, that is JSP UI. And JSP UI is responsive web design. So it automatically adjusts to any device. It is also accessible through mobile, tab, or whatever is the different kind of devices available. In all devices, it is accessible. And it also has the trending new style and for robust customizations. So after knowing all these things, so let us understand how to build this DSpace repository. So we have the software, we have the platform, so everything is ready. And from where the content will come. So here is the Atmanirbhar or self-reliant will come into picture. So we need to understand what is our strength, what intellectual output our faculty members, students, and our institution is producing, and where it is lying. So first thing is we need to collect all those things, make all these people to contribute into our institutional repository. So that is the first thing which we need to do it to for building this institutional repository. So all here are the examples where or how we can collect or build our institutional repository. All the theses and dissertations which is submitted by the students of PhD students and master degree holders, they can be made available to give the login ID password as a depositor. They can contribute their thesis and dissertation into the institutional repository. So all these theses and dissertations, when it becomes online, so many other students can read that, refer that, and take the research forward. And next level is the journal articles, books, book chapters, conference papers written by various faculty members or selected students. Even these also can be made available on institutional repository. So you imagine each and every faculty member is publishing hundreds of journal articles, books, book chapters, conference papers every year. In his career, it will be like 100, even some are touching even the 1,000. When all these faculty members, professors contribute all their intellectual property into institutional repository, it will be a wonderful reservoir. So here actually we need to understand one thing about the copyright issues. As all of you already understood about the open access movement, many of the journals, many of the books or many of the publishers are allowing open access, supporting open access, and they are allowing even institutional archiving. Along with open access, there is also gold and green open access. That is, even the journal is subscription journal. The author can preserve the pre-published version, that is accepted paper, in their institutional repository. So you may all refer Sherpa Romeo platform, for which publisher is giving these privileges. You can understand and you can archive your journal articles accordingly. 99% of the publishers are allowing archiving of the accepted papers in their institutional repository. So most of the researchers are not knowing this, and they think it is subscription journal and we are not supposed to archive in our institutional repository. But even if it is published in subscription journal, that paper can be archived in our institutional repository. So those privileges are available. You can check the Sherpa Romeo for different publishers' policies, and based on their policy, we can archive and we can store all your published papers in the institutional repository. So along with these, we can also preserve the lecture notes, presentations, reports, even the question papers. Even you can digitize the answer sheets and put it on our institutional repository. And each and every library and institution, they'll keep on digitizing many content. All this digitized content can come on institutional repository, and each and every institution will have photographs, videos, a lot of programs, lectures, lecture videos. So all these videos, photographs, all this multimedia content also can be preserved on institutional repository. And even research data sets, software, whatever the software developed by the institution, even that source code also can be preserved on this institutional repository. So like this, there is no limit for building institutional repository. There are multiple ways, multiple content is available. So whatever is digital, whatever is intellectual output of the institution can be preserved on institutional repository, and that can be disseminated to the user community. So now let us understand how to host or install this DSpace institutional repository. So we can start with minimum 8 GB RAM server with 2-core CPU and 100 GB storage, just to try out your own institutional repository. Or if you want to go for high-end server, you can go up to even 32 GB RAM, 2 TB storage, and 8-core CPU. And we can install DSpace institutional repository on any local server, and it can also be installed on the cloud server. So most of the times, many libraries, they try it on some desktops and local CPUs. I recommend please don't do that. When we are giving the access, when we are collecting the entire intellectual output of the institution, it should be collected in a proper way. It should be preserved in the proper way, in the proper server, which is having the proper backup and which can be up 99.99% and which can serve the user community as part of dissemination. So I request all of you to at least use some good server for hosting this institutional repository. It can be your local server or it can be on cloud server. So now let us understand what are the advantages of this DSpace institutional repository. As all of you know, it is completely open source, it is completely free. There is no need to pay any license fee to any developer or any company for installing this repository. And it is very easy to learn. There are many tutorials, videos, YouTube videos are available. It's very easy to manage and can be used by any institution, university, any non-profit organization, or any enterprise. So there is no limit. There are ample of examples are available of using this DSpace across the world in different organizations are using from different domains. It's not only relevant to academic institution, it is also relevant to other non-profit and enterprise organizations also. And on this platform, very easily there are inbuilt workflows are available for controlling the quality of the content, and there are maker and checker workflows are available, inbuilt workflows are available, which can be customized or configured very easily and which can be implemented as per our institution's workflow. And there is largest community of DSpace, the DuraSpace, to support our institutional repository. So these are the advantages of DSpace, and we can all try to build the DSpace institutional repository more confidently. And if you want to build, there are a lot of service providers which is listed on the DSpace platform. So we are also proud to inform that Informatics Publishing Limited. So we are also listed under DSpace service providers. So you can also contact us for any of your requirement for building any new institutional repository, or for migrating into new version, or customizing your existing institutional repository, or if you want to give, so if you're looking for support and maintenance, so we can help you in all these aspects. So you can contact us for any of your institutional repository software. And apart from DSpace, we also support ePrints, which is also equally strong institutional repository platform, which is also used by hundreds of repositories globally. In India also, that is contributing 34% of platforms. So you can, for any of your requirements for DSpace or ePrints, you can contact us. So we would be happy to help you. So thank you very much for listening to us. So thank you very much for providing this opportunity. At a closing note, I wish all of you a happy Teachers' Day, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagannath, for such a lovely session. Very informative it was. And you rightly mentioned that along with ePrints, DSpace is widely used across the globe. And there's an advanced version of DSpace Crease, to which Informatics has got expertise in implementing that.
Right.
As you mentioned in the last slide itself, Informatics is the only active member of DSpace community in India. So that talks about the credibility. Thank you so much, Jagannath. You can stop your screen share now.
Thank you.
Now here is the time for question answer session. Though there are very few questions available for us today, I'll ask some of the questions mentioned in this. Whether Drillbit software is accepted by Indian universities similar to Urkund software. Please provide the comparison of Drillbit versus Urkund. This is the question asked. Check if Raghavendra can answer it.
Yeah, can you audible?
Yeah, audible.
Yeah. See, Drillbit, the comparison between Drillbit and Urkund, the Drillbit is an first number one is it's an Indian made product. It's an indigenous and Indian-made product. The second thing, we are having the effective repository system that you could not find the features in the Urkund. Third, our plagiarism detection software has been integrated with the grammar tool. You could able to check the grammar of the uploaded document, whether spelling, style, grammar, etc. That is the feature we are having. And our software analyzes the hidden character as well as alphanumeric characters. And also we have included a lot of features like QR code. If you scan the QR code, you can download the document through your smartphone. And also a lot of customization option features existing in Drillbit, whether it's a digital respect to the digital certificate or whatever, the download the statistical reports, which is very crucial and required at the time of the renewal, so that we can give it in the customer's customization requirement. And also our software will cover the live content coverage. It could be cover the, if you can check with any live newspaper or anything, you can copy and upload the same document. The Urkund will not analyze, but our software will analyzes.
Perfect.
And also,
thank you so much,
these are
Raghavendra.
the few comparison I had given. And respect to the universities, as I mentioned in the beginning of the slide, more than 20 plus universities, they are across the India, they are using our software. And UGC either are implement are not dictating, influencing, or mandating to the use the specific A or B software. It's the choice of the universities. They can use whichever the software they can read. This UGC has mandated that it has to, they have the sophisticated plagiarism detection software placed in their university level. I hope they have clarified their answer.
Yes, exactly. And I think we have seen many places where they are having Urkund also, but they still had gone for Drillbit because of the advantages what Drillbit has over Urkund. So all those advantages of Drillbit over other softwares will be shared to you separately by email.
Yeah, sure. Right. And also, I would like to add some more thing. Whatever the customer we are adding, they are migrated from Turnitin to our customers, because earlier they used to some product. Why they are migrated? It understood that what are the features we are having, cost effective, economic benefit, lot of feature customization. These are the things which is very attractable to the customers. That's why they are migrated to our product.
Perfect. Okay.
So do we have any questions respect to my topic?
Yeah, if it is there, I'll definitely talk to you immediately.
Sure.
Yeah, one more is there. If research scholar want to check his plagiarism on its own, can he get Drillbit software?
Yeah, but we are giving license to the institutions. If the student want to check individual document, they can visit to our website. We have clearly mentioned the price tag, and they also do the online payment. And once we receive the payment, they can send the document to our given mail ID. We will check the document and will revert back to the respective customer.
Okay.
The individual option is there.
Okay. In fact, after this webinar, those who want a trial of 1 week, we can offer a free trial of 1 week to all of them, those who ask for it.
Sure.
One more question is for, I think maybe for Jagannath ji. Can we use DSpace in small college library?
Yeah, definitely we can use DSpace in small college libraries. So every library can build or make use of DSpace for building or converting your library into digital library, and you can build your own collections. You can build your own community.
Okay.
So it is possible.
Mr. Raghavendra, one question is for you. Is database integrated with Drillbit?
What, Devendra ji?
Is Krishikosh database integrated with Drillbit?
No. We are not having any databases integrated, but we could able to access. So it will analyzing unless until the user community or the institutions wish to deposit their thesis and dissertation to our repository, we can accept. So it's a wish to the respective institutions.
All right.
Yeah.
I think these are the questions what we had. Now, okay, one more is there. I think maybe Jagannath can answer this. Sir, copyrighted material can be uploaded in institution repository, both remote and campus accesses. Maybe it can be answered by Dr. Narendra Kumar also.
Yes, sir. According to the agreement, we are having right to access the material, not to upload the material. But there are certain category. There are certain category for which we can upload that, like visually impaired student. For that, we can upload the document and provide the access to them, but not the regular user. For regular user, if you have right to access, that means you can access only. You cannot upload the document on your.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much. That's it. I think these were the questions what we had. I'm getting many messages in the chat link. Let me just convey. There is no feedback link available for today's program. One. Second, many people are asking for certificate. Yes, those who attended the program till the end on both days, they all are going to get certificates. Third, yes, along with certificate, they'll be getting the recording of today's and yesterday's webinar link, and they'll be getting the presentations made by the speakers. We'll be sending the attachment of this also in your mail within 1 week, because we need to do it. We need time for processing the video and making the certificates. Thank you so much. Now it's over to you, Dr. Lone.
Thank you so much. So during the first discussion, talking about the review today, we heard regarding the advantages of remote authentication software in digital libraries by Dr. Ravindra Kumar, who discussed about various advantages of it during the COVID-19 pandemic. He gave an example of University of Delhi and how they supplemented the teaching and research, enabling them to make an impact with the help of remote access facility. And during the second lecture, we heard from Dr. Raghavendra discuss about the anti-plagiarism software developed by them that is made in India. He discussed about the UGC guideline that is good for very useful information for our participants. And the topic was nicely presented as the awareness regarding the plagiarism is must during and after the COVID as well. Software developed by Dilbert are having a backend database of more than 58 million articles. That is very good. We were happy enough to hear that they have support for Kashmiri language as well. I myself discussed about COVID-19 and open access movement. During the last discussion, we learned about the institutional repositories and implementation of DSpace was discussed by Mr. Jagannath. Hope we all have learned regarding this during these 2 days, and I won't waste much time, and will continue with the vote of thanks in this at this point of time. It feels good to end the program on good note, and vote of thanks is imperative to acknowledge the efforts of all who have contributed towards this successful webinar. It's not an easy job to conduct such webinars, let me tell you frankly, in this part of the country where internet services is still to 2G to many districts, but we still manage, and it needs willpower to do such kind of programs, despite having a critical situation outside created by the COVID pandemic and other things. We got support from Messrs. Informaticus. We're very lucky enough to have support from them. And I, on behalf of Allama Iqbal Library and Informatics as well, thank Honorable Vice Chancellor, University of Kashmir, Professor Talat Ahmed, for approving this program, Dean Research for inaugurating the national webinar. We thank him for encouraging us, the Allama Iqbal Library. We thank Dr. Tariq Ashraf, Dr. Narendra Kumar, Mr. Sanjay Grover for delivering on the occasion and accepting our invitation to speak on this occasion. We thank Mr. Raghavendra, Mr. Jagannath, Mr. Kannan for giving us information about the products which are required during and after the COVID-19 pandemic as well. I thank all the panelists, technical persons who made this event successful. I also thank staff of Allama Iqbal Library, Informatics for their kind support. I also thank blog siters which promoted this event and WhatsApp groups which promoted this event, and this event came to a successful end. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants who have made this event successful, as it is they who for whom we arranged this webinar, and they respected our efforts by showing their presence yesterday and today as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dharmendra, as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And as you rightly said, sir, there are so many webinars going on. Despite that, people have chosen to be here. I must thank all of them on both behalf of Informatics. Thank you very much.